So can you explain what a value management office or VMO is and its core purpose within an organization transitioning to agile implementation?
Sure thing. So I'm going to give you an explanation first, and then I'll tell you why those pillars of the VMO exist, right? So the first thing is to understand about the VMO is that it is a team of teams. So if you're familiar with the Stanley McChrystal concept of a team of teams, we have representation both up and down the organization chart and also left and right across organization silos so that we can create what's called a lattice structure.
Can you elaborate on how the VMO influences and nurtures the required cultural changes in an organization moving towards business agility?
Yeah, so this is the question from time immemorial, right? So when we bring a group of people there, and we want them to work in a particular way, and we want them to behave in a particular way, right? Our culture is that unspoken set of rules that we all follow, that we all agree to, and that we all follow, and then it regulates how we behave, our collective behavior.
Feeling stuck as a Scrum Master or Agile coach? Want to take your career to next level and drive real business value? This episode explores the power of Value Management Office PMO as a game changer for Agile transformations. We will delve into strategies for optimizing flow, fostering a strong Agile culture, and ensuring value delivery all within the VMO framework. Tune in and discover how to unlock your full potential as an Agile leader. We have Sanjiv as a guest today for the podcast. Sanjiv Augustine is a true leader in the Agile and Lean space with over 30 years of experience under his belt. He's the founder and CEO of LeadSpeed, also a renowned author, speaker, and trusted advisor to executives at leading companies like Capital One, CNBC, and Samsung, to mention few. As a testament to his vast knowledge, Sanjiv even wrote the acclaimed book From PMO to VMO, Managing for Value Delivery. Beyond that, he actively contributes to the field by holding leadership positions like chair of the Agile Alliance, Agile Executive Forum, and founding various communities focused on Agile and Lean practices. So to find solutions for optimizing the flow and maximizing value in the organization, listen to the episode till the end. So without much ado, let's get started.
Hello, Sanjeev. Welcome to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. It's a great pleasure and honor having you on our show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ramya. Thank you, Vivek. Glad to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Likewise. So today we want to have a conversation about Value Management Office. That is your specialization. And we also know that there's a book called as or named From PMO to VMO, right? So we want to have a conversation around that. And we know that there's a lot of buzz around this value, flow, project management, agile, not agile, and all those things. So we want to understand your perspective on that. So to begin with, maybe for our listeners who do not know what VMO is, so can you explain what a value management office or VMO is and its core purpose within an organization transitioning to agile implementation?
Sure thing. So I'm going to give you an explanation first, and then I'll tell you why those pillars of the VMO exist, right? So the first thing is to understand about the VMO is that it is a team of teams. So if you're familiar with the Stanley McChrystal concept of a team of teams, we have representation both up and down the organization chart and also left and right across organization silos so that we can create what's called a lattice structure. Most organizations are siloed, and it takes a lot of effort to go from end to end, right? So the VMO itself is a cross-functional group. It's a team of teams that has management representation, it has team level representation, and it has executive representation as well. So cross-functional team of teams. It's also cross-hierarchical because we have people from different parts of the organization, different levels within the organizational structure. And it's cross-silo because, as I mentioned, we have to focus on the speed of the flow of value. So team of teams, cross-functional, cross-hierarchical, and cross-silo. What does it do? Two main things: lean portfolio management and adaptive or active governance. So lean portfolio management is all about optimizing the flow of value at a level above teams. We have agile teams, we have non-agile teams. The PMI, Project Management Institute, is big on hybrid methodologies, which has both agile and waterfall blended in together. And that's all fine. We have all these methods at the team level. But how do we now accelerate and prioritize the flow of value at a level above the teams? There's two levels there. There's a program level, there's a portfolio level. So lean portfolio management is that discipline. The other thing that we have to watch out for within any organization, and we don't talk about it that much in agile methods, is governance. It's actually people think, well, governance is not good, or it's going to stifle the teams, or it's going to be too rigorous, and we'll lose our essence of agile, right? So we have this concept that has been implemented for 5 years, sometimes longer in many of the organizations that we work with, and that is called adaptive governance. How can we integrate functions like compliance, audit, risk, legal, and architecture, and bring them into this cross-functional operation within the team of teams? So Agile VMO, cross-functional team of teams, responsible for lean portfolio management and adaptive governance.
Okay, thanks, Sanjiv, for putting or maybe giving that understanding of what VMO is all about. But again, there were a few key points, or a few definitely words that are usually we often hear around. And I think you did mention about governance and catering to what may be the risk, or what may be in terms of adaptive governance. Would you like to talk more on that aspect? When we talk about governance, is it just from an understanding point of view? Maybe I'm just trying to put across my thoughts. When I say governance, it's like there is a team which caters to execution, and then there is a support team which helps or maybe becomes a backend in terms of this execution, maybe where I feel like project managers get into, delivery leads get into, maybe people from the budgeting aspect get into. Are you referring to that?
Yeah, so India, we have the concept of I think I'm figuring many of your audience members are in India. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there's a concept of Lakshman Rekha, right? So you have this line of separation. We have to remove that. There's governance and all these things are not separate. They have to be integrated into the regular functioning and institutionalized in that way, right? So I'll talk about adaptive governance as a concept, and then I'll talk about specifically what groups we might want to integrate into the overall functioning for lean portfolio management and adaptive governance through our VMO, right? So here is an acronym for you. It's CARLA, CARLA: compliance, audit, risk, legal, and architecture, right? And included in architecture are security, so things like DevSecOps, and also more recently you've been hearing, or we've been hearing a lot about generative AI, and also machine learning ops, right? So ML ops, right? So architecture should include all of those things. All of those are part of governance. And if I want to start with the most recent thing first, or that I mentioned, the whole world is buzzing about chat GPT or Perplexity or these new models. Sora comes out, and everybody's trying to figure out how can we use AI responsibly. This concept of responsible AI. Take that, right? So let's say the VMO, we're talking about governance. Let's say we have agile teams. Some of those agile teams might be focused on innovation. They might be driving, and we work with our clients, and many of them are actually looking at AI solutions within larger organizations. Well, AI is a brave new world. Things are moving very quickly. There's no regulation, and it's going to be up to organizations in the private sector, especially large organizations. We do a lot of work with financial services organizations. They want to make sure that they're not doing anything illegal. They want to make sure they're not doing anything unethical. And at the same time, they don't want to get stuck while other companies are racing forward with innovation. So making sure we can integrate all of these governance aspects is crucial. Now, how does the VMO help? Now, in the waterfall era or in the waterfall model, everything is sort of what we call phase gate, right? So you remember in the old days,
Correct.
you used to have requirements, analysis, design, and we used to go from phase to phase to phase. And therefore, the governance was also phase-based governance, right? So we finish requirements, we put a document together, and we send it to that separate group that you are, right? Push it, throw it over the Lakshman Rekha, throw it over the wall, if you will. Now, what we need to do is to break those things down, what we're delivering, and deliver smaller chunks so that we can deliver faster and quicker. And we have partners in any one of those groups, compliance, audit, risk, and we bring them forward. And so we need to work in smaller chunks. And we also need to have what's called audit-based governance. They can come in, any of these groups can come in at any time and audit where we are, but we're not waiting for their approval, right? So we're not creating these massive queues of here's a project or here's the requirements phase. Now we have to wait for this shared service organization to go off and do all the work. Uh, they might have approvals for 10 different departments or 10 different projects in their queue, and that's going to take them, right, a long time to go. So what we want is a very disciplined process, a lean process that we're all working very closely together. And we're not waiting for those groups, but they can come in anytime and stop us and say, we want to audit this release or this increment. And so there's a key concept here. And to explain that concept, I want to bring sort of a Western phrase over here. There's a phrase here in the West, as you guys know, how do you eat an elephant? People ask this question.
Correct.
Do you know the answer? You do, how do you eat it? Now, I'm not advocating eating elephants. They're wonderful, especially. So how do you eat
I'm
an
a
elephant?
vegetarian.
Yeah, you're a vegetarian. How do you eat a block of tofu? Or how do you eat it? Oh, you're from the South. So how do you eat an idli? You eat
Break
like
it.
that's it. We have to chunk it down, right? So the second part of the answer to that over here is one bite at a time, right? So
Correct.
nobody's advocating eating elephants or anything else, but what we're saying is that when you have a large complex problem, we want to break it down to the smaller pieces. And whether it's an idli, I don't know where Vivek is from, maybe it's a dokla, you want to chop it
He's
down.
also South Indian.
He is also South Indian. Okay, well, that makes it easy. So, so so, so what we want to do is to break that complex problem to smaller pieces, and not only deliver those pieces quickly, but also orient our new audit process, our new governance process on those smaller chunks. And very, very simply, we call those chunks MMPs. You guys do a lot of work in the Agile space, minimum marketable products. And so not projects, but smaller chunks, whether it's an idli or dokla or elephant or anything.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I love how you brought so much sense to the pieces that were lying around, and you are now bringing everything together in the form of VMO, right? There's a special team that does all of these things. I mean, just trying to validate my knowledge. There is a team which is equipped to do or bring people from different say teams, or maybe different departments and different hierarchy, so that they can bring in different supporting hands which help us to run the show, and so that we can ensure the seamless and smooth execution of a project to build a product, if I
Yeah,
am making sense.
absolutely.
Okay. Maybe then what I would like to understand from you is, as an organization, I mean, the VMO's role is very critical with whatever you have mentioned. So I would like to understand that how the VMO's role is critical in optimizing the flow of value from idea to the customer. Can you share some strategies that VMOs can employ to ensure this flow is smooth, efficient, and value driven? basically what we're trying to do is optimizing the value stream mapping of any product. How can VMO help in this?
Awesome. So the best way to explain how the VMO helps is to first outline the challenges that organizations face to do what we're talking about, right? We want to accelerate the flow of value to our customers. So the first challenge that we have, I've already mentioned this, is that most organizations, especially if they've been around for a longer period of time, legacy organizations, as we call them, are very siloed. And that comes from something called Conway's Law, Conway's Principle, where you have the waterfall development process, and we have a mirror of that process in our organizations. So just like you have requirements, analysis, design, and development, we have silos for each one of those. And that's an organizational theory process that whatever, however we set up our architecture, that's how you're going to set up that's the organization you're going to land up with. So on average, we have somewhere between 7 to 9 silos to traverse to deliver that value in a large organization, any of the large organizations here. And I think in India, the organizations, the big ones, or at least the top 10, are maybe 3-4 times larger than the organizations here. I mean, you take some of the big companies in India, right? So I don't know what it is in Indian companies, but in the US-based companies, the Western companies, it's about 7 to 9 silos that you have to traverse to deliver value. So you have that horizontal obstacle course you have to overcome. The second thing is, it's the top to bottom command and control hierarchy that we face, right? So typically you're going to face multiple levels that you have to go up. You have to get a permission from my boss's boss, her boss, and her boss, and you have to go all the way up the chain and to the executives, and then you have to come down all the way. So if you take a delay that's from moving from end to end, and then you take the other delay in terms of getting approvals, you have a compounded delay. And so just as we have to figure out how to address the challenge of end-to-end delivery, we also have to address the challenge of top to bottom decision-making velocity. How can we accelerate the speed of decision-making? So how can we get across the silos quickly? How can we accelerate the speed of decision-making? Because if not, these things are going to compound with each other, right? And then perhaps the most basic is, how can we embed cultural discipline, or how can we embed process discipline, technical discipline into our organizational culture? And these are the 3 things that the VMO can really help with. Number one, we talk about end-to-end flow of value. We want to set up end-to-end teams, and the VMO is now a team of teams. We have representation from those teams in the VMO. So now we can get people collaborating, we can get people communicating, and we can get prioritization of what we need to deliver from our business customers. Again, the small dokla piece or the small idli piece or the small piece of value that's moving, that's what we're talking about, moving as quickly as possible. The second thing is the VMO can collaborate because it's cross-hierarchical. Now we can accelerate the flow of value. We want people from both business, across the entire chain. Those stakeholders that we talked about, the governance stakeholders, we want the business side of our executives and management, and we want our any delivery and IT side of them, management and executives there as well. And so we want to accelerate that flow of value as well. So get the end-to-end stuff moving quickly, get the decision-making velocity moving quickly by collaborating and putting some good techniques over there for management. And then building really awesome process discipline. We're over, 22, 23 years into the Agile movement. And I don't think people really understand, even today, that when you're doing Agile, it's not about just doing Scrum or Kanban or doing a scaled Agile process. It's about finding and figuring out a specific set of rules, process rules, and product rules that make sense for our organizational context, which are going to be different. We need a flexible process. And then when we put that process in place, we need to follow it with a very high level of discipline, process discipline. And the idea of discipline is not talked about, in my opinion, not talked about enough within agile techniques. It's all about, let's bring the team together, let's have the teams do what they need to do, let's work with the business customer, all good stuff. But fundamentally, a high performance team, the foundation for a high performance team is discipline. right? It's cultural discipline, it's process discipline, it's product discipline. And so the VMO can help enable that discipline within teams, within programs, within portfolios, and even at the executive level.
Wow. So before maybe Vivek jumps into next, maybe I just want to add over here. Uh, this is literally making so much sense because of lately I've been exploring on this topic, and I have been doing lot of brainstorming myself and with Vivek, and trying to figure out the exact the point that you mentioned. Though we were not calling it as a VMO per se, but we were trying to understand the governance excellence or process excellence. This is what we are doing that, and I am trying to implement this in the organization that I work with, the projects or the teams that I work. And this is where I am at this point wherein to find out the gaps and identify the value stream, and then try to understand the flow and how to eliminate the waste and reduce the cost. And these are the things. And I can, I mean, 1000% agree on your point when you talked about the process discipline, right? Honestly, I mean, people from the agile space would kill me for saying this, but this is what I tell the managers, that if you really want to get discipline in your project with your teams, to have some sort of maybe do anything efficiently or maybe smoothly, first put up a process that will make sense to your teams, process that will make sense to the project, that will enable the flow. So people from the agile space would kill me saying that how can you say agile is all about process and all those things? But if we really want to get onto the ground and get our hands dirty and see some change, I think putting up a process discipline is very important. And I have been doing this or promoting this within the organizations that I work. So I completely agree on this point.
Wonderful.
Okay, yes. So again, there was a wonderful point, Sanjeev, that you mentioned is regarding the process discipline. But with that, you also did mention is high performance team definitely need performance, discipline. Certainly, that is how, I mean, it's normal human tendency that if you want to exceed yourself, you need to be disciplined first. Your starting point should be, how do you ensure that you get into that discipline? But while we are saying that we need that discipline, and while we are saying that we focus on a high performing team, and with that we also bring into that aspect of how do we bring in that empowerment, giving them that more empowerment to ensure that they perform well or they do well together, right? So my next maybe I would try to put across this in thought is like, how do the governance aspect and the empowerment aspect map out together over here when we say that maybe VMO would be able to help out mapping that governance aspect and also ensuring that empowerment is given to the team as much as possible, uh, in terms of
Balancing.
helping them, yes, helping them create that autonomy of becoming more self-organizing, right? Maybe that is what my question to you is: how do you ensure that that balancing act can be taken care of?
Great question. And I'm going to tell you a two-part story. Right? And one part is the first part of the story begins before agile methods were codified and before the manifesto was written. Right. So this is my first job. I just come out of college. Actually, I was still in college. I started working for the last 6 months. I was still studying and finishing my graduate degree, and I was working on a defense project in a place called Fort Lee, Virginia. This is south of Richmond, Virginia. And at that time, what we had was there's some experimental stuff that was going on, and they wanted to put together a small team of people. So I was a junior developer there. There were a couple of other developers. There's a business analyst, and we had a customer. Now the customer was from the military, so he's in India you would call him a lieutenant colonel. Here he's called a lieutenant colonel, and that's high enough in the organization that that kind of person becomes the perfect product owner. They have the budget, they have the authority, they have the autonomy. And so we would meet with our customer, the colonel, every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. Right. So they started early, 7 o'clock in the morning. Most days of the week, we have the first on-site customer meeting. Right? We call that now, we know it as an integral part of agile methods. We would then have a team meeting. We weren't standing up. It was just a small group of us sitting in a co-located space. Now we would call that a daily stand-up meeting, right? We would work in a common code base and talk and just, Alistair Coburn, who's the grandfather of process methods in Agile, he uses the term expert within earshot. Somebody's there, you have a question, you just, within earshot, you can hear them, you can yell out, and you can ask a question, you get the answer, right? These are all ways of implementing a team-based Agile. Worked really well, we were very successful, and our customer and our product and our what we were building became very successful. So we ended up moving to another city up here in the Washington, D.C. area, and we became part of a larger team. Right now, this is over a couple of years. And now it's not just us, because we had a lot of flexibility and autonomy and we could experiment, but now we're part of a larger ecosystem. There were about 15 teams, and there were some senior developers there were senior managers there. And what they had done was that they had set up all of those teams to work together in a standard operating process and like a lean process at the enterprise level. Again, all of us work in a common code base. We had the precursors to release on demand, all this kind of stuff. A lot of product, and they were following in those days what is called the capability maturity model, which is a very sort of rigorous, lots of paper to be printed and all that. But what it brought was the discipline that we didn't have, right? At the team level. And so there were very strict configuration management process. So when we were working in our small teams, we could just check in stuff. And yes, we were all more or less disciplined, but there was no audit on top of that, right? So now there's a level to make sure that all of our configuration management, checking in, checking out, code, all the code is written, there are tests, we could do performance testing. So now you have these practices that are at the level above the teams. And to be successful today, we need both of those things on steroids. We need the small teams. We need the autonomy of the small teams. The teams need to be flexible. They need to have the ability, the tools, the support, and the money to go off and really drive innovation, right? And at the same time, at the level above the teams, we need to have a standard process. We need to have the governance. We need to have the check-ins. We need to have the management support, and we need to have that coordination and cooperation at a level above the teams. Now, in Lean, they call this the Six Sigma paradox. How do you ensure that teams themselves have the ability to innovate, multiple teams, and yet at the same time, how do you ensure that you put in a level of governance that supports these teams and allows them to, it removes the redundancy. Ramya, you talked about reducing waste, making sure that we have processed. All of that is the responsibility of this team of teams at a level above the teams. Yes, it does make sure that it does impose some constraints. It's not unfettered. I can go off and do whatever I want in the team. For example, we might decide to standardize on a tool. Everybody starts to use Azure DevOps or Jira or whatever. And it's not, each team now may not have the ability to go off and do their own thing. Now, all teams will work within this single tool, but that standardization is necessary for scaling. That standardization at the level above the teams is necessary for governance. It's necessary to reduce risk. It's necessary to accelerate speed, not just at the team level, but to the aggregate speed when we are aligning it. So we'd like to think of this, as moving from a cruise liner, a big ship with waterfall, but that takes a long time to turn around or a long time to move, to a set of speedboats. Now, each one of our teams, if you're going off in different directions, then the speedboats are not coordinating. But how do we get all those speedboats to align and to work in a consolidated fashion? That's what we need. We need both. We need the speedboat, our individual teams, and we need that coordination and alignment mechanism at the level of the teams.
Wow. This, the way you are explaining or the examples that you're giving, it is making more clearer and clear. The picture is getting more clearer and clearer. And I align when you said that when we say that we need that discipline at the team level, doing what they're doing efficiently. But then there is also a need of a governance, or maybe just an example, maybe an audit to see whether are they doing all the practices that they are supposed to do, or what are the gaps in doing that, and how can we put up those or fill those gaps by maybe having a process discipline over here, and maybe having the collaboration between these speedboats and the ship together, or maybe the layers that we are talked about. So how can we bring in these things together? So this is making more sense. I think it would really help me and Vivek when we were doing so much brainstorming. I think uh, this podcast is happening at the very right time so that we are getting our answers over here. So at least I feel that we are going in a right track. So maybe since we talked about the process discipline, what I want to touch base upon is the cultural discipline. So many organizations like grapple with cultural shifts during agile implementation, right? So can you elaborate on how the VMO influences and nurtures the required cultural changes in an organization moving towards business agility?
Yeah. So this is the question from time immemorial, right? So when we bring a group of people together and we want them to work in a particular way and we want them to behave in a particular way, right? Our culture is that unspoken set of rules that we all follow, that we all agree to, and that we all follow, and then it regulates how we behave, our collective behavior. If you think about culture, that's our collective behavior. A violent culture is a culture that has a lot of violence as its defining factor. A peaceful culture has a set of rules, unspoken and maybe explicit, that drives a very peaceful way of functioning, right? If we want to build a culture that is entrepreneurial, collaborative, and value driven, then we need to think about how to inculcate those types of values and build a plan and reinforce those at every level. So I say at every level because there's something called holistic change management, and this has been around for a long time. There's ACRT principle and organizational change management, and there's a lady in Australia, I think her name is Sinead, I forget her name, but she's a great change management guru. But ultimately, it's about saying, how can leaders and teams exemplify the types of values, the types of behavior that we want to see? We want to see collaborative behavior. We want to see a high level of process discipline. We want to see a focus on customer value. We want to see quick decision making. So how can we embed that into the way we work, our communications, the behavior that we have from day to day up and down the change? So the first thing we need to do is we need to have a holistic change management plan. The VMO can help work with whatever existing legacy group is there. Usually there are OCM groups, organizational change management. We could bring in, if they don't have anything else, the VMO can work with those groups and bring in their own techniques, right? Then we need to make sure that we drive the agile adoption through immersion. The best way is to, if you want to follow something, is to completely immerse yourself, right? So they tell you want to learn a language. The best way to learn the language is just to go and live in a place where they speak that language all the time. So if the VMO and if management and leaders need to exemplify agile behavior, the best way, leaders and executives and anybody, even including business partners, everybody needs to be immersed in these agile practices. So the VMO, the groups that it works with, we have something called an executive action team. All of these groups immerse themselves in the way of agile operation. Let me give you an example. I was talking to an executive friend of ours. She's a CIO, and we had worked with her group at the portfolio level, right? She was the CIO, and she brought in, we helped her with enterprise agility. So there are multiple teams, multiple departments, And now what she's doing is she's introduced that way of functioning to the executive team. And she was talking about how what we might think as simple things are big challenges at the executive level. So these are C-level people. And she said, we're just going to have a daily meeting. And so they're like, what are we going to do in the daily meeting? And so they went and read up about the daily meeting. And they said, it says here that we have to stand up. Do we have to stand up in the meeting? No, you don't have to stand up. How long is the daily meeting going to be? So just things that we might take as embedded into what we've been doing for the last 20, 25 years at the team level, or the last 5 to 10 years at the management level, these are still new at the executive level. So how can we immerse our executives? We need to cut a lot of the stuff out of it, right? So we don't need to confuse our executives with stuff like story points and this and that. But what are those core aspects of behavior that we want to see? So immerse leaders in Agile, and that leaders, that means all the way up to the executives. Okay? The other thing we need to do nowadays is to move more quickly. I don't know if you guys are doing anything with AI and AI product development, but Agile is the best process. Agile practices and this culture is the best process to do this stuff, right? So there are 3 shifts that need to happen, right? So we have these Agile teams, and now we're talking about, culturally, what are the cultural shift? The first cultural shift is the shift up that I just mentioned. We have to shift up into leadership. We have to teach our senior leaders and executives, or I shouldn't say teach, that's very sort of hubristic, but we have to help them understand what needs, how things are done, and then enable them to operate in this Agile way. The second shift is shifting left to business departments. How can we start working in a collaborative fashion, and how can we support our business department with what we call product discovery? There's that dual track Scrum model from Marty Kagan. We have delivery on the Agile teams, and we have discovery. So how can we help our business partners put in place some prioritization techniques, put in place an innovation pipeline, maybe if they're experimenting with AI, assemble an innovation team, and then help them understand how they can use aspects of lean and agile for their work, for the product discovery work, right? So the lean startup techniques are great in this respect. That's the shift left. We talked about shifting up to executives, shift left to business. And then we have the shift right. Shift right is moving downstream, right? And again, if you remember, we're trying to get this cross silo and cross organizational hierarchy thing moving quickly. So there's also a shift right from the Agile teams into deployment, into audit, into governance, all this kind of stuff. And also more recently with DevSecOps and MLOps, machine learning operations. So how do we bring those people into it? How do we work collaboratively across? And so there's an immersion that needs to happen, and then there's an end-to-end coordination that needs to happen, right? So the best way to do that is to start small. So we're back to our small chunks. Do a pilot project, get all the governance aspects, and that means shifting up, figure out how we're going to work with our executives, shifting left, figure out how we're going to do product discovery with our business partners, and shifting right, how are we going to deploy seamlessly and rapidly and seamlessly into production with all those governance aspects built in.
Oh wow, that's so amazing. I mean, so many of thoughts. Obviously, while you were explaining, I was maybe some or the other way just trying to ensure if I can pick up those points and try to see or maybe quickly reflect on how we are doing things at this point of time within our organization. Obviously, and I was also parallelly making certain notes because those are so wonderful points just to ensure that whether we are all aligned to it or not. But since you did mention certain points related to shifting left or shifting right or working small, having certain pilots, and I believe maybe this is again my thoughts is like certain way to ensure that we are taking calculated risk, or we are trying to ensure that how we are mitigating those risks, right? I mean, whether we work in small set of maybe in terms of a small project, or maybe the smallest of the an MVP that we can say. Maybe I'm just trying to put it in that aspect. But while we say that we should be working in small batches or small size or small projects, and that is again related to how we are managing the risk associated with it, right? Uh, how do you think that VMO can contribute in identifying and assessing, or certain way mitigating those risks while we are following an agile transformation? And do you think that that is quite easy, or maybe it's not that easy to do that? But do you think it's quite manageable having this kind of a setup?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is very sort of a defining aspect of the early adopters of Agile, and certainly the manifesto authors you've spoken with, like Jim Highsmith and others, right, is a humility, right? And the humility is in, we don't think, or they don't think, that they know everything. Agilists should never believe that, right? But I think what happens is, there's something called a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, or half knowledge.
Dangerous thing.
Yeah. So it's like you don't know what you don't know, and that makes you arrogant, right? So the issue there is that what has happened is that within the Agile community, and it's changing in the last couple of years, that there was this craze around Agile methods. Right? And so it went to the Agilist head, and they're like, we're the smartest kids on the block. We know everything. And everybody's coming to us. And when they come and say, we need some sort of management, the response, the arrogant response, or the non-humble response is, we don't need no stinking project managers. We don't need management, right? So
Correct.
that arrogance should be replaced with humility and an understanding that we don't know anything. So that you're asking me about risk, right? So after from a development career, I spent a number of years as a project manager. The project management community, PMI and others, have solved this problem decades ago, not even just years ago. But our agilists who are sitting in their little, in their little shell somewhere in the well, they don't know what's outside the well, right? And so now that barrier that Lakshman Rekha has broken down, and you find that the project management community is full of agilists, and the agilists are full of project management community. So in a long story to say, there's simply something called the risk register in project management, in the PMBOK, in the project management body of knowledge, and we can outline all of our risks, especially since we have people representing multiple silos and multiple levels of the organization. We can do a risk planning a part that will fit in with our big room planning or PI planning or even the sprint planning. We can identify the risks. We can prioritize those risks. There's something called a risk impact probability matrix. And then once we have something, let's say the red are the very high priority, dangerous, high impact risk, yellow is medium impact, and then green might be low impact. We take those that prioritization, just like we prioritize user stories, we prioritize the risk. We come up with a mitigation plan. We take the action items for this mitigation plan, and we just fold them into our agile sprint operation. So they become part of the program planning, they become part of the portfolio planning, and then they become part of the sprint planning. And then we execute on this risk. And that's integrated into the Agile way. So these questions have been answered. We just need to figure out where they are. They exist out there, and especially with all the tools that we have at our disposal, we can easily find this. The project management PMI has a certification called the PMI ACP. I helped design that program many years ago. And as part of the PMI ACP program, this handling risk is just an integrated part. So if you get an Agile certification from the PMI, you're going to know the answer to this question, what I just told you.
Wow.
But a lot of people don't know that.
It's amazing to know that you helped them to design this PMI ACP. We have been hearing about this, so many times, but then we didn't know this history that you are associated with this in helping them. And maybe since we spoke about risk.
Sorry to interrupt. To be clear,
Yeah,
the main
sure.
person over there is a gentleman by the name of Mike Griffith. I had a very small part as part of that team over there. So Mike Griffiths is the king of who's sitting across Agile and PMI, and he was the one who helped design that program. So I just had a very
Wow.
small.
No, but then even that is significant, right? So that no one can take away that from you, for
Mhm.
sure. Yes. So maybe now we want to talk about since we talked about risk and we talked about culture discipline, we talked about process discipline. So now what we want to talk about is, I mean, this is what most of the agilist or any manager or project management people talk about is maximizing the value, right, through the entire organization. So could you please provide some insights in how VMO ensure value is consistently delivered, measured, and improved upon through the agile journey?
Sure. So there are a lot of mantras floating out there, right? So one of the mantras that you might have heard in the last few years is project to product. They say, well, you have to move from project to product,
Mm,
right? Now, my first question is, what does that mean? Good, good thought. It certainly, when somebody says you need to move from project to product, I don't believe that a wholesale move of giving up projects is the right way, right? So if you look at organizations, the lean exemplar is Toyota. Toyota has a hybrid model, a product based, right? So they have the cars that are their products, but they also have projects that drive a lot of these things. So a project based level for non-products is you have to maintain that, right? Whether it's project or whether it's product, the first shift that we need to put in place is understanding what is customer value. Because with lean, which is, as I mentioned, we have to always come back whenever we're dealing with agile methods, we always have to come back to that foundation of lean. So what is customer value? Right? And if you start to say, who's our customer? First of all, when you say, what is customer value? We have to say, who's our customer? Who's our customer and how can we deliver things of value to that customer? So one of the first things that we can do in terms of measuring is the lead time or the time to value. That's the driving metric. It's more straightforward to do than anything else. So we can measure lead time within at the team level, and then we can measure it at the program level, and then we can measure it at the portfolio level. And that's where our tools come into place. As long as we're all using the same tool, then the tool that we're using should support measuring time to market or time to value at the team level, at the program level, and at the portfolio level. And we should be able to aggregate that from end to end. So there has to be a line of sight. In lean, we call it a line of sight from teams to the level above the teams to the level above that, so that we can go end to end and we can measure these things not only at the individual team level, but up the chain as well. So that's the first thing. That's how we measure value. The second we need to make sure that we do is that everything is visible, right? Transparency. Can we have a visual management system? In the old days, pre-pandemic, everything was, agile teams would like to hang out. We'd be in a team room, and then you'd have the wall behind you, and then we'd had we would have all this wonderful wall. My colleague Bob
correct.
Payne, he coined the term portfolio alignment wall, right? Now it's all digital, and it's global. So you take those, whatever's on that wall, that visual management system, measuring the lead time, measuring the decision making, the speed to market,
And
all of that is going to be in a tool, right? So we have to figure out how, number one, who's the customer. We have to measure, we have to figure out what is of value to that customer. And then we have to measure the speed of delivery to that customer. So I talked about the speed of delivery and moving quickly. Now, what is valuable to the question? Excuse me, what is valuable to the customer? That's our question. It's going to differ, right? We want to make sure that we're delivering quickly, but the things that we're delivering are actually of value to the customer. And to do that, we need to figure out, maybe have some metric around customer satisfaction, because that's going to differ. I don't know that there's a common metric or say, well, this customer needs this and that customer needs this. So therefore, there's a common metric. But some metric around customer satisfaction. Now, there's been a metric that's been floating around in the industry for a while. It's called the Net Promoter Score. Some people like it, some people don't like it. But maybe it's as simple as saying, going to our customers, showing them what they need, and just gauging their satisfaction, whatever technique we use. So customer satisfaction, speed to value, and then managers will love this. Maybe teams won't love this that much, but cost management, right? Can we reduce and eliminate extraneous costs, but we should be measuring cost reduction as well. So speed to value, customer satisfaction, and cost reduction. And all of those when we get all of those things moving, then we'll actually end up growing our revenue incrementally as well. So we can have something around net present value, NPV, for measuring the total value. But the key foundation blocks are deliver quickly, deliver what the customer needs, and ask the customer directly what they need, and then make sure that we're reducing costs as we do so.
Oh, wow. That's really amazing in terms of identifying or in terms of determining what values, how do we determine the value in terms of when we say what value for a customer would mean for. And since we have spoken about a lot of different aspects related to VMO, right from the team level to the top C-level executives as well. But I think while discussing that, we did not touch base on the middle level management, and I think that is where most of people like us, saying us obviously, because that is where we come into the middle level or the middle management in context of the execution or in context of the transformations. How do you think we as at the middle level can contribute to facilitating this as a successful agile transformation and sustaining it over a long period of time? Would you like to talk about that as well?
Yeah, so there's a management term over here called the frozen middle, right? And this just basically says that one of the main reasons that our organizations are not able to move quickly or deliver fast is that we have strategy led by executives, we have execution at the team level, and things are frozen in the middle. Right? So our question is, how do we unfreeze that middle? So if you want somebody to help you, you don't go to them and abuse them. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
And yet, what we've done in the Agile community, you can go look at is abuse our managers. With the reason we suck is management is horrible. These organizations are horrible, and that's not true. Middle management has perhaps the toughest job ever in 2024 than we've had in the last 15, 20, 30, 40 years. Right? And that's because organizations have been hollowed out. We have pretty lean organizations. Even in the larger companies, there's a big expectation on middle management. And now as AI comes in, there's middle management included, will need to be innovators themselves. And we know that. Every middle manager knows that. And in some organizations, you might be able to hide, and maybe there's some, public sector or government organizations where you can sit in and you can go in the morning to cafeteria, get your idli vada, go back, drink some coffee, and that's your work for the day. Right? But that's not the reality in most of our organizations. So the first thing we have to figure out is, how can we help middle management understand that they are the leaders of change? They are the drivers of change, not necessarily of being driven by change. So we talked about saying the VMO, our middle management, is now responsible for putting a measurement system in place, for helping the teams define that common process, for working with the executives and ensuring cross-silo and cross-hierarchy representation. All of those things need to be there in place. They are responsible, and they need to lead by example for that immersion. If we say that our teams are going to be practicing agile methods, maybe our project managers, our program managers, even our directors and VPs, VPs may be a little too high up, but directors and managers, they all now will lead from the front. They'll practice their own way of working together in an agile fashion. They'll work with their business partners. They'll work with their stakeholders, and they will facilitate that flow of value by leading from the front and making sure that that understands. So it's about helping middle management understand what it means to operate in this way, giving them the tools to succeed in this fashion. That is, whether it's tools in terms of actual tools like, Lean Kit or Plan View or ADO, whatever it is, Jira, but also tools as in techniques. You talked about risk register. We talked about measuring risk. We talked about putting metrics in place, helping them understand what's necessary. And then most, importantly, making sure that they have executive support. So they have access to executives, they have access to a budget, they can go and work with the business partner and then empower middle management to make priority change. So one of the ways we talked about increasing the decision-making velocity, the best way to do that is in Lean is they say defer decisions to the lowest level, right? The lowest responsible level of where they can be made, right? So if we have to go up the chain and come back down, then it's going to take all this time to go, that's where the time gets sucked up. Now, how do we push those decision making down? Decisions that might have been made by a CFO or by a chief operating officer or SVP, can we now empower product managers? What are the rules? Can the CFOs and the CEOs and the SVPs on the business side work with product managers and say, here are some rules. As long as you follow these rules, you are empowered to make the decision. And if you screw up, no problem. We'll come back in 2 weeks and we'll audit you and make sure that you made we can help you. So if we can take out that approval Raj, and make it an audit Raj, and empower the product managers on the business side to make decisions quickly, then we can unfreeze that middle, right? And the executives can also be happy. Who's going to do this? The executives don't know how to do this. Maybe the middle managers don't do this. The VMO can help do this. On the delivery side, similar things. What is the process? How do we engender this discipline? Things, especially with the agile methods, we generally have a pretty defined process. But what is the program management process? How do we go from a product increment to a smaller chunk, MMP, minimum marketable product, to epics, to features, to stories, breaking those things down, helping the teams know what needs to be done, and then accelerating the flow of those values, flow of value through that. Teams may not know how to do it. Across teams, they might not know how to do it. And the best way to explain this is to give you an example. So some time ago, I worked with a group that was responsible for the package software, right? So one group is implementing Workday, you guys, HR software. Another group is implementing some ERP package, not part. And what they had to do was deliver. These teams both had to deliver on their own timelines. However, at the executive level, the executive is thinking, well, I'm migrating this major program, and part of the migration is these big systems, moving from a legacy system to these modern COT systems, right? Commercial off-the-shelf software package systems. So typically they're going to have to bring in, if you work with Workday, you're going to have to bring in some consultant, external consultant. If you work with Oracle or SAP, you have to bring in their consultants. So these guys are not going to play nicely with each other, right? So the Workday guys are not going to be happy. Well, they're not going to be happy with the Oracle guys or the SAP guys. So it's up to somebody to figure out what is the timeline for the ERP implementation? What is the timeline for the HR software implementation? And how do we make sure that what they're doing aligns to our business goal? So we need to help them figure out what is an MMP in their in their construct. Delivering an ERP system, the chunks are going to be much bigger. So it's unfortunately not going to be, it might have to be that, 100 dosa or 100 idli, like a big platter. You can't deliver, there's no bite-sized chunks. The deliverables within a package software are going to be much bigger. It might take 2 months, 3 months to get any sort of chunk done. Well, who's tracking those? Who's making sure that they're getting done across the teams? across vendors, because we have to manage vendors as well. We have to manage other external partners as well. Who's doing all that? Usually nobody, which is why you hear the bigger the project, the harder it falls. You hear about all these big failures, right? It's because nobody knows how to manage the risk and nobody knows how to align delivery of value in a complex situation and a complex environment.
Absolutely. I completely agree, and I could relate to few things that you spoke about. And one thing that I would also like to mention is, I mean, whenever we do a cohort trainings for Scrum Master or Agile coaches, right? And I often ask the Scrum Masters that, who are your stakeholders? So what they say is, I mean, I can say with confidence that none of them talked about the project managers or the middle managers as the stakeholders. And this is what I exactly, and this is what I tell them, that if there are people around you in your project or in your product, so even they are your stakeholders. If you are helping them, helping the mid-level managers in easing out their work, or maybe doing their work efficiently, enabling them to do their work efficiently, then even they are your stakeholders. So if we just bring in this thought process that even they are our stakeholders, then we will not have this stiff between the project managers versus scrum masters, or why do we need this guy, that guy, and that Lakshman Rekha will be blurred when we have this kind of a mentality. So
Yeah.
I completely agree. And I think there are so many things that we need to tap upon because this topic itself is so vast and so deep. So I think it would take another podcast for us to discuss many things, because you touched upon, or you kind of open the jar of worms to discuss so many things. So maybe we'll not get into all those details for this podcast itself. Maybe the last question for today's podcast at least. Uh, Transitioning from traditional project management office, that is PMO, to an agile VMO is a significant shift. What actionable steps should organization take to manage this transition effectively, particularly with regards to middle management?
Sure. So the first thing to do is to redefine the role of the PMO. So
Mhm.
typically the PMO is known as a process compliance organization. They're going to come with a checklist and saying, are you doing this process? Are you doing process? Which is good. We talked about a defined process, but we also not want to talk about now, if the PMO's role is changing to being a value management office, then what is the role of the people in the PMO? It's not going to be a standalone PMO. Now they're going to have other people as part of the VMO, right? So the PMOs going to come in. You might have an agile process group. You guys are familiar with Agile Center of Excellence, or if you're doing
Correct.
scaled agile framework, there's the
Exactly.
LACE. So PMO now will start to collaborate and sync or synchronize with what's happening with the Agile COEs or the LACE, the Lean Agile Center of Excellence. They're all going to get together. Okay, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? Let's come up with a consolidated process. And then what is the redefined role for the people in the PMO? Now, some people in the PMO, if they're project managers and if they're schedule oriented, they'll be great for tracking. Right? So we talked about tracking value across multiple teams. There's two options. If we have a hybrid project that has waterfall aspects, or we're dependent on vendors, we can still use a historical artifact called the master program schedule. And a master program schedule is just looking at all the deliverables, the milestones across every project, every agile team, and then consolidating that and figuring out what is the consolidated delivery of value on a timeline. So it's a consolidated timeline. If you go to any project manager, they're going to know what a master project program schedule is. And if the team is all agile or the organization is all agile, then you just create a consolidated product roadmap. And our VMO members, who are historically from the PMO, can now understand, well, we're going to put these product roadmaps together at the product backlogs together at the team level, but product roadmaps at a level above the teams. And now we're also going to tie all of those to OKRs, or some delivery of value, objectives and key results. So if the project managers within the PMO are more senior, Then they probably have some understanding of how to work with at the program level. We can help them understand what these newer techniques with objectives and key results, or maybe some historical SLAs, or service level agreements. What is the definition of value? How do we capture it? And how can they work with executives to define those and then help those percolate down to the teams, right? Then we say, well, we need this team of team structure. What is this new VMO going to look like? It's a team of teams. They're cross-functional. We might have LACE members. We might have PMO members, but we also need people from the business side. We need those stakeholders. What is this group and how are they going to operate? If they're going to be immersed into an agile process, then they need their own backlog. They need a transformation backlog or a VMO backlog. They need value managers. So we talked about the end-to-end delivery of value. In Lean, there's a concept of a value stream, and typically you'll hear of this concept called a value stream manager. We would just call them value manager. Somebody who might have been historically a product-oriented person or a very business-oriented person historically in a PMO, now can become a value manager and work with the business partners, help them understand how to do rapid experiments with product discovery, and then set up a disciplined process to integrate those experiments into an agile fashion. A more technical, they have technical delivery managers or project managers. They can integrate and they can say, okay, now I'm actually going to go down a level. I'm going to go sling some code or just at least understand what the teams are level and help and understand how we're going to integrate some of these new ML ops or DevSecOps or release on demand and integrate those into our process. So the answer is going to be different for each person within the PMO. If you're very process-oriented, program schedule, performance management, risk management, that kind of stuff. If you're more business-oriented, they can become a value manager. If they're more technical-oriented, they can become a technical delivery manager. Whatever it is, now the PMO has shifted to a value management office, and we're tracking across those three shifts, either a shift up to leadership, executives, shift left to business, and shift right downstream.
Wow, amazing. I just love how this conversation started and how it has ended. And I am taking out so many notes out of this single conversation. And I'm sure whoever is listening or would be listening or watching this episode, they will at some point or the other, they will relate to whatever you shared. So many insights, so many solution oriented insights, I would say. It's not just kind of a maybe saying, asking questions, and maybe you could do this, that, but then actually workable solution is what you have shared with us. So thank you so much, Sanjay, for your time today doing this podcast with us. We have learned a lot from you, and I am going to maybe talk about a lot of things offline after this conversation has ended, because I have so many thoughts going on. As I mentioned, I'm working on something for within my organization. So definitely I want to talk about that. But for today's conversation, thank you so much. And we would definitely want to have you back on our show and maybe open that lid again, lid of with the jar of worms, and pick up worms and talk about it. So for now, this was it, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ramya. Thank you, Vivek. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you.
Thank you, Sanjiv.
Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like our podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.